If you're a cop, federal officer, maybe a pilot, maybe a responsible citizen, whoever you are, we often take it for granted when we acquire a semi-automatic pistol, kind of like this Glock 17, you know what, that it's just going to work. And we take it for granted. We take it for granted it's going to be reliable, not going to jam up on us, it's going to be comfortable and durable. But that was not always the case. And there were many steps in the road to the reliable semi-automatic handgun. In fact, not too long ago, it wasn't the automatic that was the preferred choice in the military circles. It was actually the revolver. And yeah, we're still talking modern history. We'll go back to World War I. You see this cat coming out of the trench, and what does he have in his hand? He has probably a Webley revolver. Well, why did they use revolvers back then? I mean, the 1911 by John Moses Browning was, how you doing, invented in 1911. It started being produced in World War I, widely accepted and used in World War II, and yet the service revolver continued to soldier on. The reason that is, and here's another picture, these guys got a pistol. It's kind of hard to see in that picture. These guys trusted a revolver, that's why. And it's been said that the handgun never won any world wars, or wars period. But I'll tell you, if you were a troop and that's all you had, it often would save your life. Another picture of this dude right here. Nice. Revolver was reliable, and that was the case all the way through World War II, right up even into the 1960s in Vietnam. And I got another picture I'm looking for. I'll show you of a Vietnam era F4 pilot, and this is the venerable and studly Robin Olds. If you don't know who Robin Olds is, he is the guy that basically turned around, at least in part, the air war for the U.S. Air Force. They were getting their butts kicked by some MiG-21s. Robin Olds rolled in as a squadron, maybe the group commander, I forget, and he basically turned them around. Cracked the whip, had all kinds of different tactics they'd employ to actually turn the air war into the United States' favor, and it worked marvelously. Real warrior, Robin Olds. But back to the topic, here he is representing 1960 era U.S. Air Force pilots, and look how he's armed. Right here on his side is not a 1911, but a 38 Special by Smith & Wesson, probably a Model 10 or a Model 12 Smith & Wesson. And you can see his cartridge loops there. That's how he's carrying his ammo. Incidentally, there's the old Camelus U.S. Air Force survival knife he has on his vertical parachute strap. But see, even all the way up to the 1960s, sure enough, the revolver was still preferred. And the reason why, it was simple to use and it worked. Now that's not to say that the 1911 was a slouch. And again, that gun design goes way back. So I can find a picture of it. Here we go. The 1911 was a very effective gun. There's a cutout drawing of it. I'm not going to show you that though. Here's a better picture. But the problem with the 1911, and there were a couple, and it's the reason why it was really never accepted in a widespread fashion by police departments, and it was obviously used in the military for a number of years, but still it did not usher in the age of widespread acceptance of automatics. And that's because it was basically designed to shoot full metal jacket ammunition. And civilian users and police officers, when they started trying to adapt the 1911 design to hollow points, maybe lead wad cutters, flat nose bullet designs, it would not feed well. And by the way, I'm speaking from experience. I've shot a lot of 1911s all the way from the 1970s. I'm talking about Colt versions, Springfield, all kinds. And I can attest that with non-ball ammunition, I've seen a lot of 1911s jam. Now, that's not the case now in 2008. Most of the 1911s you buy are pretty darn reliable. And that's because most of the formerly gunsmith-only modifications are performed at the factory. Kind of like a flared and lowered ejection port, maybe a polished feed ramp. By the way, the feed ramp in the 1911 is not ideal for feeding hollow points unless it's worked. It also has some extractor issues, that if that's not modified or improved, sometimes that will cause reliability problems. So what did that mean? Well, you had a design that, unless you fed it its diet of full metal jacket rounds, which, by the way, a 45 ACP loading in FMJ is a very effective round. Don't get me wrong. But what ushered in the advent of the reliable semi-automatic pistol was not the 1911, because it was finicky with ammo, it did jam, it would stovepipe, it would fail to extract, it had magazine issues, that if the magazine was just not so, it wouldn't feed reliably, and it was to the extent that it just did not open up a lot of avenues for automatic pistol use. And I'm going to kind of refer to the U.S. law enforcement scene, because that in the United States is what's going to make or break an auto pistol design, if it's widely adopted by U.S. law enforcement agencies. And you will note that it has not. Now again, I'm talking about original style 1911s. Most of the ones coming out in modern day, and I'm talking about maybe from the year 2000 on, have a lot of these modifications made, and they're pretty reliable. But that was not the case in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, and actually most of the 90s. At least not in my experience. I saw them jam all the time. So the 1911 with full metal jacket was reliable. Go outside of that, maybe not so much. Also, it had some other issues that prevented its widespread acceptance, and that is it's a single action only design, meaning for every round or every bolt, every time I squeeze a trigger, that hammer has to be in the most rearward position, and it had a safety. Now, to me, that's not a big deal, but to people who are not familiar with guns, it's a very big deal. Especially troops, conscripts that you're bringing in, maybe drafting during the 1960s, to have them learn the 1911 design and to use it efficiently under stress might be an issue. Now, of course, the 1911 was used by the U.S. forces for a number of years with great effect in World War II and in Vietnam. But when the U.S. law enforcement agencies looked at it, they kind of said, you know what? These are issues. They're training issues that we just don't want to deal with. So that, coupled with maybe some problems with hollow point ammunition and the special training that would be required for a single action gun, it just was not widely adopted in U.S. law enforcement circles. So that's a 1911. So what changed? Where did we get from here? That wasn't the one that opened it up for us. Well, I'll tell you, one of them was in the 1970s, the Heckler & Koch, Heckler & Koch, however you want to say it, the P7. That was one of the groundbreaking designs that started opening that door, which, by the way, was pretty much vaulted shut, and because of the reliability issues of auto pistols. P7 was one of those designs. Now there's others along the way. I mean, you could say, if you see this German troop here, he's got a Walther P38 in that hand. This one's got a Luger. The Luger was not very reliable. If it got dirty, it would jam all the time. Way overly complicated. Actually, that's not a P38. That's a Browning high power that German soldier has. I'll talk about that in a sec. Actually, let me back up and talk about that now. The Browning high power kind of was developed concurrently with the 1911, at least in the same era, more or less. Here's a picture of the Browning high power, and it was an excellent gun and is to this day an excellent gun, but it too failed to open the door for widespread acceptance of the semi-automatic pistol. Why was that? It was reliable, at least with full metal jacket rounds, very reliable. I mean, the Germans used it during World War II. They took over the factories that were producing the high power, and like you just saw in that picture, they issued it in wide numbers to their troops. Very effective gun. Heavy, just like the 1911, on the order of about 33 ounces. The 1911's 38 ounces. That's another reason U.S. law enforcement agencies did not want to go with the gun. Just too darn heavy. And they carry a lot of other gear already. Handcuffs, pepper spray, batons, flashlights. You cops watching this, you know what I'm talking about. The high power, although an excellent gun, had some other issues that prevented it. This is part one of the advent of the reliable semi-auto pistol. Part two is coming right up. This is Nothing Fancy. Thanks for watching.